Well, hello, SMB Nation, Microsoft 365 Nation, and the whole Nation family. Harry Brelsford with the third quarter 2019 analyst report, and I'm wearing Seahawk Blue, my number 12 fan, the 12th man fan, and we have squeaked out 2 victories. So hang on fast. It's going to be one of those years. We're playing Seattle style. I think one victory is 1 point, the other was 2 points. So typical Seattle story. Let us do a little housekeeping up front. Hold on there. There we go. For those that I don't know, again, Harry Brelsford of SMB Nation, and I am delighted to kind of give you a couple talking points. We will not go 90 minutes today. I timed this out. I suspect it'll be 30 minutes, but I never met an attendee who didn't like buying a little bit of time back to get on with their busy day. A little bit of housekeeping, ask questions using the control panel. The questions feature Jennifer Hallmark over in the radio control room will interrupt me. And a couple of, well, I'll talk about the upcoming shows. I don't even have to really go into that. That's part of the presentation on where we can connect. I have already enjoyed connecting with people this fall at Glue X this week, earlier in Scottsdale. Some of the old SBSers got together, and as always, we're all transforming our business models and looking forward. So, and a special shout out to SureWeb. SureWeb has its SureWeb Accelerate 2019 coming up. I'll mention that again, but it's in Montreal. Coming up on October 10th and 11th. I'm going to mention that one more time when we get to that part of the agenda. We continue, in fact, including fall events you should and should not be attending. I want to give a different twist. I'm going to refer to the Jay McBain work that was released about 2 weeks ago. Jay McBain, longtime community member and Forrester analyst, is always putting together these infographics that are extremely helpful. And in this case, I want you to peek, if you can see my mouse on the lower left, I want you to peek over here at the shows that he feels are relevant to our community. And some of these I'll be speaking towards. Again, I just came back from GlueX in Scottsdale from the good group over at IT Glue. Next week, not on Jay's list, but something I recommend is the Spice World event put on by Spiceworks. And the reason is it's a deeply technical show. It's quite frankly for IT pros with a tip of the hat to MSPs and our audience, but it's research oriented. They're going to have a couple of research reports. But more importantly, it's the Comic Con of the shows in our space. Ergo, my costume. I'm getting ready to be the 12th man at that show. So that's next week in Austin. The following week, the first couple days of the week is Continuum Navigate. I believe that's the first and second. Continuum Navigate in Pittsburgh. They divided Navigate up this year. They're going to have a mid-October show in Las Vegas, but the early October show is in Pittsburgh if you want to see me there. And we move on to SureWeb Accelerate. Again, SureWeb Accelerate Montreal, the 10th and 11th in Montreal. Then a first-time show, Acronis Global Summit, is the first part of the week, October 14th, 15th, and 16th in Miami, Acronis. Followed by, I'm going to hit some shows that are off the radar down in Portland, Oregon in the third, 1, 2, 3, basically the third week, the 23rd, 24th, 25th. But a couple of our SMB Nation audience members will be going to the Channel Company's Cloud Show on those same dates. And then we need to talk about ConnectWise. IT Nation ConnectWise is coming up in the end of the month. So it's the 30th through the 1st of November, October 30th through the 1st. And interesting show this year. So a couple of things. IT Nation, it's a must-do once in your life. It's emerged as the show, especially in the fall. So must-do. However, getting a little bit of feedback on the road and with my analyst hat, I should reach down and grab that hat. That a little bit of feedback that it spans Halloween, and a lot of us are parents, so a little bit of feedback there, and a little bit of feedback that it's going to be potentially a little bit different this year with Arnie Bellini out. So I will see you there at ConnectWise. We will both discover what that show looks like. Moving on to November, I can give a double thumbs up to Ingram One mid-month, Ingram One in Denver, Colorado. Now, here's two shows I don't think you should attend. Again, for what my opinion's worth. AWS reInvent the week after Thanksgiving. 30,000 people, but to be blunt, not our crowd, not the MSP crowd. If you want to go and get your Amazon on, that would be the show. The other one, I have to bypass because of a scheduling conflict, but again, not our crowd, would be Smartsheet Engage. Early October here in Seattle, Washington. Now, don't get me wrong, Smartsheet, they're fine people. It's actually a good show, but clearly IT pro. So the person that attends Smartsheet Engage is typically someone who, literally a SharePoint administrator at Alaska Airlines. Okay, so they get a paycheck. Versus our audience tends to sign, as we like to say, sign the front of the check, not the back of the check. So a little bit different audience. If you have to pick and choose, I'm not going to recommend AWS reInvent in early December. I'm not going to recommend for this crowd Smartsheet Engage, but feel free to pass on to people whom that might make sense. Let's go back to some of our topics at hand, folks. The MSP merger and acquisition window is still open but closing. So I've actually done a fair amount of digging on this one. Had some really good conversations. Something I didn't mention was Solar Winds and Power in Atlanta, Georgia. I was there the first week of September, right after Labor Day, and there was some M&A talk. So here's the deal. Okay, if you are looking to exit, cash out, or scale, and I don't mean scale organically, I would say scale strategically, which is a really good idea because of automation that's changing the value chain in our space. So it's getting harder and harder and harder to be the one-man band that to some extent defined SMB Nation. It's even getting harder to be a 5-person band in this space. So scalability is key with the changing value chain and automation, where quite frankly, robots are starting to do some of the work with RMM tools and so on. The window is still open. Money's cheap. The Fed funds rate was cut 0.25%. Money's cheap. There is silly money flowing into the MSP community. That's good and bad. When you see silly money, that means the window is starting to close because markets are very efficient. Okay, so once there's sort of the hype curve, we're kind of up on the hype curve, there will be the trough of disillusionment. And the trough of disillusionment could be that the deals don't make sense for MSPs being acquired at high valuations. I'm going to offer 2020. We're going to see that. But also the macro economy, not so much the cost of funds, but just the natural give and take of the economy. We are way overdue for a recession. And when these windows close, so again, I'm looking at my crystal ball. I'm going to say the window could close in late 2020. It might be earlier, but when they close, it could be 2024, 2025 before the window opens again. So if you are thinking of making adjustments, I would encourage you to run. Let me throw out a name of someone who's pretty good. 2 people in the space. If get out your pads. George Sirico, I'll put this in the thank you note, Jenny, and David Shafran. So there's a couple of advisors in our space that handle M&A. I'm sure they'd love to have a conversation with you. Let them know Harry sent you. But those conversations probably need to be starting now in Q4, just a few days away. as we go to 2020. So you heard it here first. Next item, predictive analytics in MSP monitoring and marketing. So we're seeing it, the predictive analytics in terms of failure rate. I think it kind of started with StorageCraft making an acquisition of a analytics firm that related more towards failure and hardware and equipment and so on. They did that a few years ago, an analytics firm out of Minnesota. That's one way to look at predictive analytics, would be, to know that something is coming up on the end of its useful life. But you're also seeing it start to emerge in marketing programs. So for example, last week, and you can see on the community news at smbnation.com, had a wonderful chat with Axient out of Denver, formerly known as eFolder. They have teamed with MindMatrix, I believe is the vendor, to bring free marketing collateral and motion to the MSPs. If you're an Axient partner, that's number one. Number two, they are going to look at how they allocate leads that just organically come into Axient. So customers swinging a cat just kind of bump into the Axient webpage, want to learn more. The good news is Axient doesn't compete with the channels partners. Axient forwards those leads to Axient partners. However, they are in the early stages of using analytics to determine what partner should receive those leads. Now, it's intuitive. You would say, well, we'll give the leads to our best partners. Now, that's intuitive, but we can do better than that. So they are using what we call rules-based scoring, and that is one form of predictive analytics, and that's where we're at. We're in a space without a huge data set, like 50,000 records, to build a true dynamic predictive model based on machine learning. So we don't have the volume for that. And in the absence of the volume of that, you use what they call rules-based scoring, and I like to call that Nutrisystems. So you get 100 points a day with Nutrisystems. You can have a cookie, you can have a pizza slice, you can have a whole lot of kale-based salad. It all adds up to 100 points. We're essentially doing that with rules-based scoring. It's AKA weighted averages. And so what Axient is doing in the background, and again, it's in the blog, and we talked at length, and I'm going to check in with them at IT Nation on how it's going, but they're going to start to build the model. Now, the cool thing about modeling is the model will change. So right now, you could say you get 25 points if you have A, you get 5 points if you have B, 30 points if you have C, whatever A, B, and C are in their modeling of what are predictive behaviors. But it's starting to happen, and I'm going to keep hammering away on that. As you know, I've carried the flag for 4 years on analytics. Sometimes we get traction, sometimes we don't, but it's coming in both the hardware monitoring, the infrastructure monitoring, as well as the marketing. And you did not hear that here first, but that is one of my analyst updates for third quarter. Going to talk about verticalization strategies. So today I want to focus on the defense sector. I've talked about a couple of different verticals that I think you need to pay attention to. Healthcare, we're not getting any younger. It's uncanny. Let me hit on healthcare real quick. It's uncanny how many members of our community are all of a sudden being impacted by healthcare. They have a grandparent that's taken ill. They have a parent that's taken ill. They themselves have to go in and get the oil filter changed, as it were. I could go. There's 2 handfuls, 3 handfuls of examples of that. So of course, healthcare, and there's compliance and HIPAA and all that. But I want you to think defense sector, and in particular. We had the 7.1 earthquake in California on the 4th of July weekend up in Ridgecrest, California, which is the site. In fact, the earthquake was on the site of a naval missile base. And what hasn't been widely publicized, my son works there as an aerospace engineer, primarily focused on wind tunnel. So I wanted to make sure that it was public knowledge. It is, but it wasn't widely publicized, is that they had over $5 billion worth of damage up in Ridgecrest on that naval facility. So infrastructure, IT, and so on. And in talking to some folks in California, so it turns out there's a couple of MSPs that serve the vendors and subcontractor on that base. True story. And so they have new work, or what I would call found money. Then if you turn on cable news or whatever your source of news is, you will know there's a lot of volatility in what we would call the peace process right now. So the defense sector continues to be funded well. And I'm going to give that a shout out for Q3 as something demanding your attention, a second look. This is a place, by the way, where your security background, so MSSP background, will come in handy. This is a place where your CompTIA Security Plus certification will come in handy. Shout out, the vertical of the quarter is defense sector. All right. Told you we go quick today, but I just want to arm you for bear as we move into 2020, something you can impact. Want to talk about found money again. So market development funds. If you go to the SMB Nation YouTube channel, the YouTube channel for SMB Nation, just simple search, you'll see that with Joshua Lieberman, we recently had a conversation about market development funds, and I think he called it make do funds. They're alive and kicking, and that properly handled in the vendor relationship. So let me back up. Vendors like Intel have MDF funds, okay? Intel doesn't really sell anything to the public. Intel's a really good example. Intel typically sells chips and other stuff to OEMs. They provide MDF funds to OEMs to go promote Intel-based laptops. They also have MDF funds for partners to carry the flag and do lunch and learns and events and so on that would support the Intel mission. MDF funds are essentially a round of funding without dilution. So I want you to think of it that way, or without a loan that you have to pay back to the bank with interest. So think of it as a funding round to get MDF funds, but you still retain ownership of your entity, and you're leveraging vendor money. And what we're seeing is the vendors are open and receptive to this. And if they don't have a program, just ask your favorite vendor, because it's a different motion for them. See, they don't necessarily have to have a double wide booth at a trade show, where trade shows are expensive. Airfare, accommodation, staff time, the booth itself. So instead of a double wide, maybe they can get by with a tabletop and a pop-up and put that money into, more efficiently put that money into the hands of people who know how to spend it best, and that would be you, the MSP. So whomever your portfolio of vendors is, surface the concept of MDF funds. Want to talk about unnatural acts. And folks, let me do a sanity check on time. We're doing fine. Boy, there's a lot of unnatural acts for MSPs, and this is a bigger conversation than the example I'm going to give you. It has to do with keeping your eye on the prize and not following every shiny fishing lure that swims by. I've been both of those people. I've worked with both of those people, and the Lego, if you go to smbnation.com and you look at my blog post this week from GlueX, where I interviewed an MIT and Wharton professor who gave a keynote down in Scottsdale on the Lego company. This is the yin and yang of business, the ballet of business, is that on the one hand, you need to diversify. On the other hand, you need to stick to the knitting. And then on the proverbial third hand, maybe you can go outside the box and think anew. And you got to be careful, because the temptation with diversification is to engage in unnatural acts. And here's one that I know to be true in SMB Nation's traditional role as a publisher, as well as working with marketing firms, is they will say, you know, you like the idea of the automatic newsletters, the tweets, the blog post, and so on to build your MSP practice. What if you took and made that a service? So like marketing as a service for your SMB clients. And I got to tell you, I've invested in this area. I watch this area. I know this area, and I'm gonna give that a thumbs down. That could be a distraction for you, the MSP, that quite frankly could focus on building up your security reputation in the defense sector, just to draw off the slide that you see. So I want you to be really careful this quarter and going into 2020 about unnatural acts via diversification and product innovation. Once again, catch the Lego lecture, the video interview I did in the blog over at smbnation.com with the professor from the GlueX show down in Scottsdale. All right, community updates. We're going to go back to Jay McBain's Wave infographic. Here we go. If you're not connected with Mr. Jay McBain, please go over to LinkedIn, send a connection request, tell him Harry sent you. I'm sure he'll accept it. But this is what Jay does, okay? And this is a really good representation of what our community looks like. I really like the work Jay's doing. Now, admittedly, it's not necessarily all inclusive, but let's start on the upper left. If you look on the upper left, you have the media companies. Now, why do we care about media? Well, vendors certainly care about media, but increasingly, I think you, the MSP, should start to develop a PR strategy because we call that earned media. And what earned media means is free publicity. And that's real different than a advertising buy and some of your other marketing activities. And as we like to say at SMB Nation over the years, everything helps everything. And so I like the idea of press and analyst relations. So few people do it, and so few people do it well, that this is your guide. So for example, MSP friendly content can be received and posted up at Channel Pro. Our friends at Channel Pro, by the way, shout out, didn't make mention, I will be there in November, forgive me, Channel Pro, in the New Jersey, New York area, and I believe that's November 6th. So shout out to Channel Pro on their one day. They just had a show in San Jose. So that's upper left. Let's drop to lower left. We already looked at industry events. So Jay McBain is put together events that he thinks are worth a conversation. Let's go back up to the top, industry associations. So shout out to CompTIA. They did a great job with ChannelCon in early August in Las Vegas. CompTIA, gotta join, it's cheap. You get the free ticket to the show. Got to be there. They're essentially the industry leading trade association with a strong presence in security and government affairs. And guys, you just got to step outside the server room, as it were, every now and then and get involved in the community. So shout out to CompTIA, followed by IAMCP, that's up there as well, the Microsoft Partner Organization. Now, let's drop down beneath the center little figure, and we have thought leadership and peer groups. And I am proudly, I'm proud that SMB Nation is in that category, because while our SEC code, it could be argued, we are technically, we have behaviors that mimic an integrated media and event company, which that be the far left. I'd rather be thought of as a community. And a community to me means a reason for being. Now, we certainly grew up with Small Business Server, but we're much more than that as we evolve, headed into 365. And I can tell you, we struck gold next week on the 26th. Our MSP Tech Talk academic series continues, and as a community, we have the flexibility to have academic lectures that maybe other people won't touch. So for example, next week on the 26th, MSP Tech Talk, we have SD-WAN, and we are seeing a lot of conversations building on SD-WAN. So that's a double thumbs up for 2020. That right now you can educate yourself on SD-WAN, you can become conversant in it, you can start to think about the architecture of SD-WAN, and then you're ready to rock and roll in early January 2020. So that's what I think a community does, is let us tackle conversations that maybe can't be monetized today and meet payroll tomorrow. So we want to play the community game. And the other thing that we're doing in the community game is building up an Azure conversation. So we're seeing momentum with Azure. We had overwhelming attendance earlier in the quarter, MSP Tech Talk, when we had Azure plus small business. We're bringing that back. We're seeing vendors start to have that conversation, and trust me, it's an evolution. So that would include Nerdio, and a couple of others are starting to socialize the Azure conversation, SMB. That is a natural act, and it is a new conversation. Finally, the vendor communities. So that's not a surprise. Let's just give a shout out to, I don't know, how about our friends over at Lenovo? And then finally, the distribution community. Blue Star, we're having very interesting conversations with Blue Star and verticals you might not expect. I'll save that for another day. And then I just saw PAX 8. Over at the GlueX, and they had booth traffic. So PAX 8 is getting momentum, and I guess I would throw our sponsor SureWeb over there. They're really a CSP, but I'm going to put SureWeb over on the lower right and encourage you to give SureWeb a tip of the hat, take a peek, and hopefully attend SureWeb Accelerate in November, what did I tell you, 10th, 11th, 12th in Montreal, October 10th. Hello, let me get that right. Let me go to my own little cheat sheet. 10th and 11th in Montreal, SureWeb Accelerate. Let's move on to the next topic. Little bonus conversation for you here would be the wave of migration. So low-hanging fruit would be the Windows 7 migration, EOS coming up on 7 after the first of the year, as well as Server 08. I don't want to lose track of that conversation. We started this conversation with some well-attended webinars in May of 2019. It is now October, okay? Have I seen movement in this area, the migration motion in the MSP community? No, I have not. That's not a surprise. Everybody waited for Windows XP. Now that was end of life, not just into support, but EOL on Windows XP was April 14th of 2014. Hard to believe that's 5 years ago, but people didn't even start the motion, sadly, until April 14th of 14. So we tend to lag behind. Jenny, raise your hand if we have questions. I know I'm kind of plowing through what I think is important, which brings us to our thank you slide, folks. I promised you a quick hitter to check off on topics that I think are important for you to consider in Q4 2019. More importantly, an eye to the future in 2020. We're sitting in late September. You can impact this. You can make a difference. So In the absence of, or without further ado, keeping you away from the salt mine and profitability and good work, I want to thank you for attending the third quarter 2019 analyst report. Folks, we talked about a half a dozen items, including events you should consider, events you should not consider, a vertical of the quarter, the defense sector, M&A activities. We have silly money right now that will dry up within the next year. So if you're going to exit the industry, God bless you. If you want to somehow scale in the industry strategically, God bless you. With that said, I am going to keep my promise. We're right at 30 minutes. I wish you well.
Harry,
Yeah, Jenny?
Harry, we do have one question. What is the guy's name that does the community stack?
Yes, thank you very much. Let's go back. Thank you, Jenny. It's Jay McBain. Jay McBain at Forrester. Well-known dude, for lack of a better word, in our space. And the easiest way to get to Jay, go to LinkedIn, look up Jay McBain. If that search doesn't bring it up, Jay McBain Forrester, and he will happily connect with you. I know Jay pretty well. My only ask on that, Jenny, is that people write a customized LinkedIn note. And if you could be so kind as to mention my name for two reasons. One is I want to know Jay, let Jay know we're thinking about him, but more importantly, you will get Jay's attention with a customized note with some reference to something he knows, so he feels good about accepting your LinkedIn invitation in this day of social media, if you know what I mean. So Jenny, if the deck is clear, I'll go ahead and let these good folks get back to work. We will see you next week on the 26th for SD-WAN. Let's go back to the thank you. Thank you, as always, for supporting community. I'm staying alive. I'm staying energetic. I'm watching out for you. So you watch out for all the rest of us. We're all in this together. Thank you very much. Have a great, great day.